the lesson of Uxbridge with the people voting against the ultra-low emission zone isn't that they don't want environmental measures, is that they do want to be consulted, to be given a fair time to fit in with things, for it to be fair to everybody in the community.
Let's go through Sunday morning's stories then with the former Conservative leader and apparently tech bro, William Hague. Good morning, William.
Good morning. Yes, I heard that discussion earlier.
With approval by the sounds of it.
With approval. No, I'm really into tech. I just don't understand how any of it works, but I'm all in favor.
I think that's the position of many of us. And also the former Scottish Labour leader, Kezia Dugdale. Morning to you, Kezia.
Good morning.
We're going to talk about housing first of all. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is writing in today's Times saying that the government is committed to their 300,000 houses a year target, with Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove saying they're confident of reaching the target of 1 million new homes this Parliament. Now, William Hague, I'm sorry, I'm going to confess to being confused here because I thought it wasn't a target.
What, the million, the 300,000 or the million?
The 300,000.
Well, it's not a target that anybody has ever reached, let's put it that way. And because it's not being reached now, the million, it's fair to say the Conservatives promised 1 million new homes in this Parliament, and that they're probably going to achieve that. They're probably going to hit that. So that is a good thing. And the measures that were announced yesterday, which is really about more innovation in housing in brownfield areas, that I think those are good ideas. But 300,000 houses a year hasn't been achieved, even in the best years recently. So that's still a very distant prospect.
Is that deeply disappointing, do you think?
Well, there's good news and bad news here, isn't there? In what I've just been saying, a lot has been achieved. There was 1 year in the last few years where 243,000 houses were built. So there's a lot going on, but the demand isn't currently being met. So my view is that what the government announced yesterday is really welcome, but that there will need to be more measures like that. There's more innovation needed in housing design, actually, because the answer isn't to build ever more 3-bedroom detached houses on the countryside. But we do need more closer to people's place of work. And some people who only use a place for 2 or 3 nights a week while they're working in a particular city could actually live in a smaller space as well.
I'll tell you what's not welcome is the idea of building 250,000 homes in Cambridge, an urban quarter, which was derided by the local Tory MP Anthony Brown as nonsense, who said there is no water here.
Yes, well, I know Anthony Brown. He's a very good MP for that area. He will know his stuff about that. So what he says should carry a lot of weight, and that just shows the difficulties here. But it also underlines you need the infrastructure to go with it. You know, we haven't built many reservoirs in this country for a long time because we assume it rains all the time. We have long periods now where that doesn't really happen. So the infrastructure is going to have to go with these things.
Kezia Dugdale, do you feel that the debate has moved on at all? Or is it still a case of we need to do something and stating the absolute obvious on one side, the other side being, well, no, you can't do this because I don't want this in my backyard and we don't have the infrastructure? Or has something changed?
Well, what's changed is that housing seems to be rising up the political agenda, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. I'm a trustee of Shelter. I sit on the board of Shelter across the UK. I know the extent of the housing crisis facing the country, and I'm delighted that both Labour and the Conservatives seem to now be in a position where they want to address it and bid with each other on policies. What matters is that we build affordable homes in the right places. And actually, it's a win-win because you get the economic boost from house building. You can alleviate poverty by reducing the benefit bill. There's an awful lot of people stuck in very expensive accommodation, clearing housing benefit in the private rented sector that could be living in houses that are built by the state and reducing the cost left, right and centre, and it would improve everybody's well-being. Of course, there are issues around planning, there are issues around building on the green belt, There's a lot of merit to building on brownfield sites. There is, I think, also a lot of merit in trying to bring people back into city centres to live, to revitalise them. All of these things are good things. I wouldn't want to shoot any of it down. It is all about balance, but all that balance needs to be seen in recognition of the fact that the country is facing a housing crisis. There is an emergency right now, and people are rising to it, and that's good.
And yet there are still people who, even in the face of that, presumably because they've got a house and they're all right, say that, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to oppose this with every fibre of my being. And obviously those people need to be won over. So how do you win them over if you haven't managed to so far? I mean, it's a really difficult question, Kezia.
Sure, and I've been a elected politician. I've had those people at my surgeries saying they don't want a housing development because they've got a lovely view from their back bedroom onto a green field. And I understand that, and there are processes in place to manage that. But I'm talking about a housing emergency where you've got a huge number of people in temporary accommodation just now that are looking for 1 or 2 bedroom properties, just as William describes, in city centres close to places where people can work. So quite often we talk about housing, we make it sound like we're building these gigantic villas in these beautiful green pastures. That's not the housing debate we should be having. It's about how we address the fact there's an awful lot of people in their 20s, 30s and 40s desperately in need of decent 1-bedroom flat that is affordable and in good condition. That's the business I think the government could be in, and have a separate conversation about planning in suburban areas and that development. Don't conflate the two. They're completely different issues.
Yeah. But do you think a target is helpful or not? And not a numerical target?
I think targets in any public policy area can be debated, but they drive activity. As long as you don't make poor choices at the end of it, aspirational targets, I think, on balance, are a really good thing. I'd much rather, though, we focused on the affordability of housing rather than building 100,000, 300,000, 1 million villas in leafy suburban areas. That's not going to address the housing emergency.
Let's move on to green policies. Rishi Sunak has said the government's green pledges must be proportionate and pragmatic. His comments come as questions mount over his commitment to net zero policies. Fortunately, Michael Gove was on early and he gave us a very direct answer to this question.
What about the banning the sale of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030? Is that immovable?
Yes.
It is immovable?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness we got a straight answer on that.
There we go. Michael Gove does do this. He occasionally almost wants an interview. He'll answer one question directly, and that was his for today. William Hague, it's interesting he's willing to sort of die in a ditch on that one, because there does seem to be a wobble coming our way from the Tories when it comes to green policies, because they might learn the lesson from Uxbridge. They've got very rambunctious people on the right of their party who think this is all a load of nonsense, and they're in deep electoral trouble, and they might want some sort of Brexit-style Hail Mary to get them out of it, and being anti-net zero might be that thing. Where do you read the tea leaves when it comes to the Tories and green policies at the moment?
Well, being anti-net zero isn't going to get anybody out of any electoral trouble, because I think voters fully understand that it's really important, and just look at the scenes around the world at the moment, to hit those net zero targets. And I don't think they'd forgive any government that seriously weakened them. Now, having said that, you still have to make sure that what you're doing is carefully worked out, will work in practice, is being fair to people along the way. And not everything that's been announced on environmental measures is necessarily perfect at the moment. So I think the lesson of Uxbridge with the people voting against the ultra-low emission zone isn't that they don't want environmental measures, it's that they do want to be consulted, to be given a fair time to fit in with things, for it to be fair to everybody in the community. So I think that's the lesson. So some things can be changed, but actually transforming the environmental situation, the whole way we deal with energy and transport in this country, it remains vital. And I don't think the government will go back on that or think that it was sensible or electorally sensible to do so.
But isn't it, you're just talking about housing policy, this is moral NIMBYism, isn't it, a bit? Here, where we say we all believe in net zero, we all believe in climate change, but I don't want to pay any price for that. I don't want my life to be more inconvenienced. I don't want to spend any more money, particularly if I don't have very much money to begin with. That's the problem here, that everyone can agree, maybe, or many people can agree on the ideal, but it's very hard to implement things that cost. And when you're absolutely facing electoral wipeout, you're not going to be a government that says to someone, this is going to hurt a little bit. And if we don't hurt a little bit now, we're all going to collectively hurt a lot in the future. That's one argument, William.
Well, it is. That's a strong argument, and that means you do have to listen to people. For instance, there's no point telling everybody to get a heat pump, sort of a gas boiler, if they're not confident the heat pumps work well enough yet. So that's just common sense. Then you have to allow an extra year or two for them to work properly. Just using that as an example. And even in Germany, where the Greens are in government, in the coalition government, they've just had a spectacular political row and climb down over this issue of gas boilers in whether they can be put into new houses.
So would you delay that policy? Like Gove implied that to us, he would delay that. It's supposed to be by 2025, isn't it? That feels like a delay's on its way.
I think it actually rests on what is technologically possible. Because if you can't confidently say to people, well, there's a really good alternative to this and it will work in your house, well, then, of course, you're leading people to anger and despair in the future. So, yeah, some things, I don't think it's not like a religion. It's not like, well, we can't alter anything. That everything that's been announced now is like a Bible and you can't alter it. No, that's not common sense. But does it still all have to add up to reaching net zero in 2050? Yes, it does. Maybe other things need speeding up. We were just talking about housing. Well, innovation again in housing design, so that houses need very little energy, and such innovations are coming along. That is going to be a very important way of achieving these goals.
Kezia, I wonder if Labour are wobbling a bit on this as well. There's a sort of the Miliband position, which is the win-win. Everything we do to go green will give us more jobs, make us richer, make our bills go down, which may be true in 10 years' time if everything works in the manner that William is talking about, if the technology all comes in, but isn't clearly going to happen in the first 5 years. I wonder if Labour are having to be honest as well to say, actually, a green agenda in the short term isn't win-win. We have to find some ways of meeting the cost, and that's a difficult political message as well.
I think all political parties, and I would throw the SNP into this mix as well, have discovered through their focus groups and their internal polling that climate change isn't doing what they thought it would with the electorate. The public aren't responding well to it. They're so worried about the cost of living. They don't want additional costs into their lives. And as a consequence of that, they're responding to those focus groups and abandoning the leadership they desperately need to show on these issues. I'm really worried at how poorly the issues around meeting net zero are going to be treated by this general election campaign. After a week of the Uxbridge result, we're already reviewing policies that have been in place for years, and there's an awful lot more that we have to do. I would really like to see political leaders across the political spectrum say just exactly what you've described, Stig, which is this is hard, this is going to be difficult, but it'll save money in the long run. And dare I hope for some sort of cross-party unity on that end, because otherwise we're going to really suffer here.
William and Kezia, stay there. We want to hear your thoughts on TUI and EasyJet, what's happening in Greece, and whether you do push-ups or press-ups at your office desk. I cannot wait for the answer to those questions.
He does them in the adverts. William Hague does.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah.
You seem to know an awful lot about William Hague. We're going to move on and talk about the situation in roads, because the consumer group Which says that it is deeply irresponsible for airlines to continue flying tourists to roads while there are ongoing wildfires. We'll be speaking to them after 9:30. But that goes directly against what Michael Gove told us this morning.
The travel companies have been very responsible. And I think it was the Greek Minister of Tourism who was broadcasting yesterday, pointing out that the fires on roads, terrible as they are, affect between 10 and 20% of the island. So the expertise that the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office have, I think, is right. And they keep a watching brief.
And if you were due to go on holiday to Rhodes tomorrow, would you still go?
Yes. In fact, I'm due to go on a holiday, God willing, to Greece in just over a week's time, not to Rhodes, but to another island. And I'm looking forward to going. I think Greece is a wonderful country, a wonderful place to holiday, and we do need to support the Greek government in dealing with the situation in Rhodes. My heart goes out to those who are affected, but I think the advice is clear. If you follow the Foreign Office advice, it is safe. William Hague, you have some experience of the Foreign Office, I believe. Do you think
I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if you start warning against travel to somewhere, then there are insurance repercussions. But is it as simple as Michael Gove points out here, that we are talking about something that affects 10 to 20% of the island?
Well, he's quite right in what he said. Yes, I've often been involved in what can be finely balanced decisions about whether to change travel advice, because you can accidentally add to the damage to a tourist industry. If you change travel, or if you said now, for instance, against all but essential travel to the island of Rhodes, well, then all those people who are going to places that aren't affected by the fire would then be affected by that travel advice. And future bookings would be, so those Greek hotels will have lost a lot of money. You'd probably bankrupt some of them. So you have to be really careful with it. And then you say, well, is the answer to say don't travel to a certain bit of Rhodes? But then you have to change that advice every few days, according to fires are. So that's why if the travel companies can actually deal with the situation and get people into different hotels and get them out of there, as they appear to be doing, where their holidays can't continue, that is the best solution without changing the travel advice. That's why the Foreign Office is doing what it's doing at the moment, I think.
Kezia Dugdale, Michael Gove's off on his holidays to another unnamed Greek island. If you had a holiday planned to Rhodes in the next couple of weeks, what would you do about it?
I'm just back from Greece. I had 2 weeks in an island just off the coast of Kos. But in all honesty, I don't think I would be going if I was booked tomorrow. I understand that, the Greek government's advices come and the UK government's advices go, but I would be having a chat with my wife and a conversation about what our options were, and looking at whether we had enough disposable income to book another flight or make alternative travel plans if we did decide to go and then needed to leave again. I think there's an awful lot of people on package holidays who won't have that big pile of disposable cash to plan an escape route and will choose not to travel because it just feels like an unnecessary risk. It's not the type of risk you want to be thinking about when you're going on your annual holiday. It's
difficult though, isn't it? Because you're balancing risk against money lost, presumably. I mean, I'm trying to work through what you'd be able to claim. Would you be able to claim anything? What would you have to do? Those are the conversations that you would be having, aren't they?
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people now don't go through a travel agent, don't have a package holiday. They'll book their flights separately and their hotel accommodation separately. And that has huge implications in terms of what you can get back as well. So it is a complex picture, but I understand why political leaders need to stick to the advice for all the reasons that William has said. But in all honesty, if I was looking to go next week, I think I would be making alternate plans.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you were just talking about that, I wouldn't take children there.
Yeah,
I just say that the heat is one thing, but heat plus fire plus travel chaos, it just feels like the chance of something going a bit wrong and ruining your holiday is pretty high, isn't it? Even if it's technically safe to go. Here's another one for you to wrestle with. The Mayor of London's new campaign calling on men to say mate to a mate if a male friend is making sexist comments has been called totally inadequate and patronising. The video shows a group of male friends, and if you'd like bad acting, you are in luck. If you don't, I'm warning you now, this is them sitting around playing video games.
Bro, you need to lay down the ground rules straight away.
Is that what you did with that girl you took out in Shoreditch?
Well, nah, she ghosted me. Probably wouldn't know a good thing if it slapped her in the face. Someone I'd gladly do if I saw her again.
Mate!
What did I do now?
Stop! Just stop, man. You can't be saying that, bro. That's serious stuff.
Obviously, I'd never do it.
Yeah, but just saying it is bad enough, man. You know that.
Yeah, I understand.
Bro, this...
Yeah.
I understand. You've made a good point that's going to change my behaviour now. The campaign says a simple, familiar word is all you need to do to interrupt a sexist friend. Kezia, I'm being a bit mean about it, and people have criticised. And I think there is some sense in saying people talking can lead to bad behaviour, and if you call out bad behaviour early on, you stop it happening. I can buy that. The execution makes me want to cringe into non-existence. What do you make of this all?
Well, look, it would be so easy to shoot it down as an idea or as a campaign because it's cringy. I've watched it as well, and it doesn't land in the way that you hope it would. But I'm not going to do that because it's absolutely the right message. We know when it comes to harassment and the way that women are treated and violence against women agenda more broadly, that bystanders, men being allies to other men and talking to them about their behaviour is a huge part of the picture that needs to be addressed. So the campaign is the right campaign, even if we don't particularly like the execution. And we're talking about it, Stig. Would we be talking about this issue if it wasn't so clumsy?
Yeah, well, actually, I think we did. 'Cause there was a good Scottish one we played earlier, which we did talk about because it was so good. So I think we could have gone both ways, actually, on that. William, what do you make of it? The performance and then the message, and can you separate the two?
Yeah, I think you can separate the two. I agree with Kezia. It's an important campaign. It's a very important issue. It won't work, though, introducing a word in this way. I think language follows changes of attitudes. And it's very hard to just, by order, introduce a word. That's not how language develops. So I think most people will find trying to invent a new word a bit risible. And so perhaps the campaign needs redesigning.
Yeah, it's not a new word, a new pronunciation of the word. Well, it's just sort of trying to symbolise it with the word mate.
Please, I'm begging you to stop doing that.
Don't blame me, blame Sadiq Khan for that.
All right, I will.
Yeah.
Inside Times 2, are you ready to alienate everyone in your office by saying things like, mate? No, we've got the guide for you, from sitting on an exercise ball to doing press-ups under your desk. I'm sure that's going to go down really well in the office. We can only assume this is what happens at number 10 as the government urges employers to prioritise health at work. It's clearly very important to be... every day we talk about obesity. We're talking about major diseases that more of us are going to have, in the next 20 or 30 years. So we want to stay healthy. Is it up to employers to prioritise health at work, do you think, Kezia?
I think it's in their interests to prioritise it. I'm not sure it's their responsibility. I think a healthier, happier workforce will be more productive and will produce better results, and that will be their guiding interest rather than any sort of sense of altruism. But I do think they should support it. Yeah, it's a nice added benefit to have your employer care about your health and well-being and try and incentivise that in some way.
And is that adding things in, like, let's all do a kind of group workout? Can't think of anything worse.
Absolutely not.
Or is it about taking things away and saying, come on guys, can we not have cakes at work every day?
Or it's discounting gym memberships or incentivising other types of activity, like taking time out in the day to go for a walk or to move around, or just gentle nudge type behaviours that might improve our overall well-being.
Put your eyebrows down, Stig Abell. What is wrong with you?
I agree with Kezia, but I'm just saying, in practice, when people go off to exercise in the middle of the day, they come back and everyone stares at them hatefully.
No, but wouldn't you rather that they actually, in the grand scheme of things, that they were exercising?
I absolutely would, but I'm just saying, in practice, I just think that's not how it works in offices.
All right, okay. William Hague, what do you think the role is of the employer in trying to get everyone to be a bit healthier?
I think employers do have a role. And for instance, I have a thing against offices that don't have access to stairs.
Oh.
And everybody goes up and down one floor in a lift, which is ridiculous.
We have 14 floors here. Is it all right that we get the lift?
No, well, that's okay. But if you're going down from the 14th to the 12th floor and back up again, do you need the lift? No. But the way things are designed could encourage more exercise. And all these things mentioned in the post are all very sensible things to do. But don't kid yourself, that because you've shuffled along to the coffee machine and stood up and stretched, that you've had a full workout and done yourself a lot of good. You still need to get out there and run or cycle or swim or go to the gym or something. So it's not actually a substitute for doing that.
No. I know you like to lead by example, William. What's your daily workout or exercise?
Oh, without going into too much, I do something every day, but cycle or run or swim or lift weights or, go for a long walk or something. So, it adds up quite a lot.
Peloton.
Yeah.
Oh.
Press ups, but not under the desk. I think that is just a little undignified. and leads to a lot of heavy breathing in meetings or on the radio, which might be a bit disturbing to people.
I think it could be. We're with you there. William Hague and Kezia Dugdale, thank you both very much. And if you like listening to the thoughts of panellists at 7 p.m. Monday to Thursday, John Pienaar goes through the big stories of the day with two guests.